Here's three price scenarios that I have on my mind. When it comes to Coti, let's say there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, even though nothing I say is financial advice. The first price scenario that I do want to take a look at is maybe the idea of Coti, let's say at the price of 80 cents. Now that's a 16x from here, and market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be nearly 2 billion. Now the reason why this wouldn't necessarily surprise me is because I like the fundamentals of Coti. When it comes to Coti, when I was first talking about it, it was focused on the payments market, but since then, it's evolved. And I think it's evolved actually in a pretty good direction because now Coti is an Ethereum layer 2 that is, I would arguably say, privacy-centric. Because again, the main complaint that sometimes people have when it comes to something like, Coti is that, hey, do we really need another Ethereum layer 2? But again, while many Ethereum layer 2s out there, they kind of feel a little bit the same, this one again, Coti, privacy-centric Ethereum layer 2, so I do like that. And that kind of gives it a kind of unique and differentiating factor, I think, compared to some of the competition that may not necessarily be focused on that, right? I mean, we see a lot of Ethereum layer 2s out there, just really we don't know what they're focused on. Sometimes they're focused on blockchain gaming, but again, this has a privacy focus, so I do like that specific niche that it is focused on. Now, if we take a look at Ethereum layer 2, why do I think arguably pretty beneficial in the grand scheme of things? It's because if we take a look at Ethereum, there's a couple drawbacks. Like for instance, arguably the gas fees, which are arguably sky high. I'm not a fan of that. Also on top of that, we take a look at the arguable scalability issues. Now Ethereum, despite being a very massive layer 1 blockchain, I would say that it's arguably not perfect, right? So this is where an Ethereum layer 2 kind of steps in. Basically kind of allows Ethereum to be enjoyed, but at the same time not necessarily having to deal with kind of the drawbacks that I mentioned before. So then, again, when it comes to Ethereum layer 2, it does play its role, but there's a lot, right? I know that, but at the same time, Coti kind of adds its own unique touch, and I do really like that in the grand scheme of things. And Ethereum, it's just very massive, very popular. We take a look at the Ethereum ETF, again, just a very massive layer 1 blockchain. So I like the direction in which Coti went towards, I would arguably say, because again, being focused on payments, it's not a bad market, but at the same time, changing to become an Ethereum layer 2, I like that move as well. So arguably, if let's say there is a fully fledged altcoin season, Ethereum, let's say, really has more attention maybe, and again, if let's say there's more bullish factors than right now, Coti at the price of 80 cents wouldn't necessarily surprise me if those conditions were to maybe happen. Now, the second price scenario I want to discuss about is Coti at the price of maybe 90 cents. Now, that's an 18x from here. Market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be slightly above 2 billion. The reason why this wouldn't necessarily surprise me is because we've seen like Dogecoin pretty much 40x that market cap, like 40 times that, right, back in 2021. And I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to be the biggest Ethereum layer 2 of all time or something like that, but it just doesn't seem like such a, arguably I would say, outlandish market cap in the grand scheme of things, but this is just my point of view. Now, the next and final price scenario I want to talk about is maybe the idea of a dollar. That's a 20x from here. Market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around $2.3 billion. Now, the way I view this is that due to the more, I think, bullish factors, arguably right now when compared to back in 2021, like for instance, right? Back in the peak of the 2021 bull run, around 300 million crypto owners. Now, there's over 600 million, supposedly more than ever before in history. And I kind of combine that with the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF. To me, it just feels like if, let's say, there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, if it looked better than back in 2021, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. And again, if that maybe were to happen, a dollar when it comes to Coti wouldn't necessarily surprise me either. But even besides that, when it comes to the timeline, people like to say, okay, what am I thinking about? Now, what I'm thinking about is based off history, right? And I've seen how, historically speaking, usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak a year and a half around that time after a Bitcoin halving event. So a year and a half from April of last year, which was when the last Bitcoin halving event happened, would mean October of this year. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen at that time though, but that's just what I'm thinking about in my mind. It could happen later, like who knows, right? I can't control when things to do this or do that. Like maybe it happens in November, December, or Q1 of next year. Only time will tell. But whenever the timeline is, I'm just going to be dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting in an event where maybe it does happen. It doesn't mean it will. However, again, in an event where maybe, let's say, it does do something, I want to just be prepared by just holding, dollar cost averaging, and that's it. I treat it like a patience game, and I'm just going to be waiting. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Greatly appreciate it. It's only the captain. I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.